It's strange the things your brain chooses to latch onto when your life collapses. For me, it was the vest, a plain navy fleece with a broken zipper and a bleach stain near the collar. I gave it to Owen after a fishing trip years ago. He'd spilled beer on his jacket, and mine was the only spare. Never got it back. That vest became his second skin, worn in like a favorite lie. And apparently, it became her comfort, too. My wife cried on it. She told me that later, though not with guilt. More like she was explaining an inevitability, like rainfall or gravity. I was upset, Alex. I needed someone. I cried on his vest, she said, her eyes glassy but dry. No tears left for me. Let's back up. 2 months ago, I noticed a change. It always starts small. Her phone face down at dinner. Her laugh quieter, but not absent. She had energy, just not for me. When she smiled, it didn't land. It skimmed the surface and disappeared into that void where secrets live. Owen had been around more lately, dropping by with that too-easy charm, that subtle smirk like he was in on a joke I hadn't been told yet. My best friend since college. The kind of guy who never grew up, but people forgave him for it. He made irresponsibility look harmless. I didn't want to see it. The glances that lasted half a second too long. The way her voice softened when she said his name. But I saw it. God help me, I saw it. It was a Sunday afternoon when the cracks turned into a chasm. She was in the shower. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I didn't mean to look. I swear that on whatever honor I have left. But when your gut screams, you listen. The message lit up the screen like a flare gun. Owen, can't stop thinking about last night. The way you held on to me. The way you cried into my vest. Let me know when he's gone again. That vest. Of all the details, that's what unstrung me. The intimacy of it. Not the sex, though that implication was there. Not the betrayal, though that burned. It was the idea of her weeping into his shoulder, trusting him with her pain, using his body as shelter while mine was still warm in our shared bed. I stood there, phone in hand, letting the nausea bloom. I scrolled up. Dozens of messages. Flirting, confessions, arrangements. It hadn't just happened. It had been building for months. All those nights, I worked late to cover extra bills. All those weekends, she insisted I go golfing with Owen so she could have the house to herself. I've been facilitating my own humiliation. The worst part? He knew I trusted him more than anyone. He used that. Weaponized it. I didn't confront her that night. I needed to see what betrayal looked like in the daylight. The next morning, I made breakfast. Eggs, bacon, her favorite vanilla creamer in the coffee. I watched her chew, watch her fake her way through thanks, babe. She had no idea I'd read everything. No clue that I could smell the lie on her skin. Then I called Owen. Beer tonight? I asked. Always, he said, chipper as ever. No tremble in his voice. No hesitation. He was calm, which meant practiced. Like this was just another Tuesday. I told her I'd be out late. She barely nodded. Probably assumed she'd have time for a round two. At the bar, I watched him closely. He wore the vest. Of course he did. Like a flag planted in my territory. You look like hell, he said, sipping his IPA. I almost laughed. Rough week. He shrugged. Life, man. It took everything in me not to punch him across the table. Instead, I leaned in. You ever feel like people show you who they are too late? He froze for a split second. Just enough. Not sure what you mean, he said, eyes darting. I smiled. Neither am I. We drank in silence after that. Not for long. I excused myself early, said I was tired. Left him there with his lies and his vest. When I got home, she was already in bed, pretending to sleep. I stood in the doorway, watching her breathe. Her back was to me. I wanted to scream, to pull her out of bed and show her the messages, to make her explain, to force a confession. But I didn't, because the truth had already been laid bare. She cried on his vest, and that broke me more than anything that I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to her, listening to the subtle shift of her breath, steady, untroubled, like someone who believed the performance was holding. I stared at the ceiling and counted every flaw in the paint, every heartbeat that pounded against my chest, every scenario where I dragged the truth into the light and watched it burn us both. But I didn't want a confrontation. I wanted something cleaner, colder. This wasn't about rage anymore. It was about control, about letting them dig their own graves while I sharpened the shovels. By sunrise, I'd already made my decision. I wasn't going to tell her I knew. I wasn't going to scream or cry or fall to pieces like she probably expected. No, I was going to smile. I was going to pretend to be the same oblivious man she'd been lying to for months. I was going to be polite, patient, and I was going to take everything from her before she even realized the floor was gone beneath her feet. She stirred around 7:15, yawned like it was any other Monday. I watched her slide out of bed in that long gray sleep shirt, the one I bought her during a weekend trip to Asheville when we still shared jokes that weren't edged with resentment. She kissed my forehead on the way to the bathroom. The gall of that gesture almost made me laugh. I brewed coffee. She got dressed, talked about a meeting she had later. I asked if she wanted dinner tonight, and she smiled like I was a golden retriever trying to do algebra. "We'll see," she said. Translation: "I'll see how fast I can get to Owen's apartment." She left in a hurry. I waited exactly 10 minutes before I opened her laptop. Password was the same as always, Jason123. Our dead dog's name. Ironic how loyalty meant nothing to the people who used it as a password. I copied everything: messages, calendar invites, emails, hotel receipts, the works, onto a USB drive I slipped into my coat pocket. Then I started phase 2. I called Eric. Lawyer. Old college buddy. Divorced 3 times. Cynical enough to believe everything I told him without needing the emotional backstory. "You want to play this quiet or loud?" he asked. I told him I wanted leverage. Not revenge. Not yet. Just enough rope to let her hang herself. Then you're going to need proof. Financials. Timeline. Motive. And you'll want to start separating assets before she figures it out. I already had the financials. Her little shopping sprees, the Airbnb receipts, the second checking account she thought I didn't know about. I had motive too. Owen. The affair. The emails practically wrote the screenplay. What I needed now was time. I needed her to think I was still asleep at the wheel. I played the part to perfection. That week, I cooked dinner. I asked about her day. I gave her back rubs. I let her believe she was getting away with it. I let her believe I was shrinking. She smiled more. Felt invincible. I could see it in the way she carried herself, like a snake that had just shed its skin and decided the world owed it a runway. On Friday, she said she had a girls' night. That was new. She usually just lied and said it was a late work thing. The shift meant she wasn't even bothering to mask it anymore. It meant she trusted I wouldn't check. That night, I followed her. Not closely. Not like a lunatic. I waited until she left the house, gave it 10 minutes, and took my car 2 streets over before I turned on the GPS tracker. I'd tucked into the wheel well of her car 2 days earlier. The signal pinged her downtown, then over to Owen's loft. Unit 4B, top floor. I didn't go up. I just sat across the street in my car, with the windows cracked and the engine off, watching the lights flicker in his window, while they probably drank wine and pretended their love story was some kind of brave rebellion. I didn't feel anger. Not then. I felt nothing. Just a quiet clarity, like the world had finally stopped pretending to be something it wasn't. I stayed for 23 minutes, long enough to see the curtain pull back and her silhouette leaning toward his. Then I drove home and called Eric again. I want to initiate the split, but not yet. I want to bait the hook first. Make her think she's the one in control. "You're playing a long game," he said. "Damn right," I replied. "You have the patience for that. After what I read in those messages?" I said, "I have all the patience in the world." The next morning, I was already at the stove cooking breakfast when she stumbled in, hair tousled, shirt inside out under her coat. I handed her a cup of coffee like a man completely unaware. "You look tired," I said. "Long night." She hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough to register the risk. "Yeah." Ella and Kara wouldn't shut up. Wine, tears, the whole thing. I nodded like I believed her, like I bought every syllable. "Poor thing," I said. "You should rest today. Take it easy. You're too good to me," she smiled. "I know," I replied, kissing her on the cheek. She didn't realize that every move she made from that point forward was being recorded. Every bank transfer, every visit to Owen's, every lie she told layered into a case so tight not even the most aggressive divorce attorney could save her. I already had the wiretap set up in the living room. Jason helped with that. My son, 12 years old, Smarter than both of us. But you'll hear more about him later. Because he's got a part in this too. A big one. But not yet. First, I had to let her keep believing that everything was fine. That I was still in the fog. That Owen's vest still held the only weight of her guilt. She had no idea that I'd already started gutting the floor beneath her. No idea that I was about to make her cry again, but this time, not on his vest. This time, she'd cry into the cold, silent void left behind when I took everything she thought was hers, and walked away without looking back. The day I realized my son knew more than he let on started like any other. Jason was in the den, hunched over his tablet, earbuds in, brows furrowed in concentration. It looked like a kid immersed in a game or some endless YouTube rabbit hole. But when I passed behind him and caught a glimpse of the screen, it wasn't cartoons or Minecraft. It was code. Real code. Strings of logic I barely understood, scrolling fast and deliberate like fingers spelling secrets only machines could read. Homework? I asked, masking the tension in my voice. Sort of, he said without looking up. He minimized the screen with a swipe that was too fast, too practiced. It didn't sit right. But then, not much did anymore. I went back to the kitchen and pretended to read emails. My phone buzzed. Eric, my lawyer. We're good, he said. The paperwork's in motion. She won't see it coming. That night, I couldn't sleep again. Jason had gone to bed hours earlier, but his door was cracked. Light spilled out onto the hallway carpet, flickering slightly like a strobe. I knocked gently, and he didn't answer. I opened the door. He was out cold, arms wrapped around his pillow, headphones dangling from the edge of the bed. I moved quietly, gently lifting the tablet from where it lay, face down on the mattress. The screen was still active, and what I saw stopped me cold. He had voice files, dozens of them, all titled with dates and times. I clicked one at random and heard my wife's voice through crackling static. Owen, he has no idea. None. I swear I feel guilty sometimes, but then I remember how boring it got, how invisible I felt. And with you, Jason had planted a mic in the living room, maybe more than one. My 12-year-old son was building an archive of his mother's betrayal. He hadn't cried when she missed his piano recital, hadn't thrown a tantrum when she forgot his birthday last month. No, he'd been documenting, storing it all like evidence for a trial no one told him to prepare for. The next morning I confronted him, not with anger, just curiosity. When did you start recording? He didn't flinch. He looked up from his cereal and wiped milk from his mouth with the back of his hand like we were talking about science fair projects. After I heard her say she might leave, he said. Didn't trust her after that. Didn't trust Owen either. I stared at him. This was a boy who still slept with a nightlight, who cried when his hamster died. But betrayal had changed him, hardened him. You shouldn't have to carry that, I said. Neither should you, he replied. And that was it. That was the moment I realized the stakes had shifted. This wasn't just a broken marriage anymore. It was a battlefield, and my son had picked a side. The files became my ammunition. Every audio clip reinforced what I already knew, that they thought I was stupid, blind, easily discarded, that they were planning a future together, a version of life that edited me out like a bad paragraph. But the files weren't just for me. I compiled them into a folder labeled simply, in case, burned it onto 3 different flash drives, one in my safe deposit box, one given to Eric, and one I mailed anonymously to Owen's wife. Yes, he had a wife. Estranged, but not divorced. She lived upstate. Quiet life. Barely posted on social media. I found her through a return address on a forgotten wedding invitation in a drawer. The irony was surgical. I didn't include a note. I'll let the audio speak for itself. Jason, meanwhile, kept recording. He upgraded his equipment. Bought a cheap microphone off eBay using the prepaid card I thought he used for games. He'd slip into rooms before she came home, check sound levels like a little spy in pajamas. We became co-conspirators, not in the malicious sense, in the survival sense. 2 people pushed to the edge by someone who thought loyalty was optional. I asked him once if it made him feel better, hearing it all. He nodded. It makes me remember I'm not crazy. That hit harder than anything else. Because that's what betrayal does. It erodes your reality. You start questioning if you overreacted, misread, misunderstood. But Jason, he needed the truth recorded just to stay anchored. Then came the night. I overheard her on the phone in the kitchen. She thought I was asleep. I wasn't. He's still in the fog, Owen. I can't believe it. I think I'm going to ask him to sign over the car this week. Then the joint account. He'll say yes. He always does. The smile in her voice made me grip the banister so hard my knuckles cracked. She wasn't just cheating. She was siphoning the future out from under me, one signature at a time. I walked back to my room, pulled out my folder of evidence, and wrote one name across the top in red ink. Exposure. It was almost time, but not yet. Let her think the car would be hers. Let her think I was still asleep. Let her lean just a little further out over the edge. I wanted her to fall all the way down. And when she did, I wanted the last thing she heard before she hit bottom to be her own voice. I told her it was her idea. That's how I played it. Made it seem like I was bending over backwards to please her again. We haven't had anyone over in a while, I said as I slid eggs onto her plate that morning, watching her stir her coffee absent-mindedly, pretending to be present. You used to love hosting. She blinked at me like I'd suggested we adopt a third dog. Dinner? Here. Just to Owen, I said. I owe him for helping with the basement leak. I watched her carefully then. The way her grip on the mug faltered, just a hair, just long enough to register. She recovered fast. Too fast. Sure. Sound fun. Fun, right? I told her I'd handle everything. Groceries, wine, setup. She wouldn't have to lift a finger. And that part was true. The only thing she'd need to bring to the table was her guilt. Owen showed up at 6:42. Right on time. He brought a bottle of Malbec and that stupid grin he wore like armor. Still had the vest on, too. Of course he did. I was almost grateful. It made things poetic. Long time, brother, he said as I opened the door. I let him in, clapped him on the shoulder like old times, like I hadn't been listening to hours of him whispering into my wife's ear while she wore the silk robe I bought her last Christmas. You look good, I lied. Come on in. Claire came down the stairs like she hadn't been rehearsing all day in the mirror. Her makeup was too polished, smile too wide, eyes darting like a deer waiting for the gunshot. Owen, she beamed, kissing him lightly on the cheek. Too lightly. They were trying to act, but I'd written the script. Dinner was salmon. I cooked it too perfectly, paired it with asparagus and garlic potatoes. The table was set like something from a Pottery Barn ad, and I could see it unnerving them. People who are hiding things don't trust perfection. It puts them on edge. We talked about everything and nothing. Work, weather, that new French place downtown. But under the table, their knees were still. Too still. They weren't touching, which meant they were trying not to, which meant they were thinking about it. After dessert, chocolate tart, store-bought but beautifully plated, I topped off the wine. Let breathe. Let the silence stretch just enough. Then I pulled out the manila envelope. Claire's fork froze midair. Owen's smile twitched. I found this old photo album in the attic, I said casually, sliding the envelope to the center of the table. Figured we could have a little nostalgia night. You know, relive the good OL days. Claire reached for it first, fingers trembling just slightly. She opened the flap and pulled out the contents. Not photos. Not exactly. Printouts. Screenshots. Transcripts. A USB drive paper-clipped to the top page. Owen leaned in, brow furrowed, then froze. The color drained from his face like someone had opened a trapdoor inside him. Claire didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the first page. One of their messages, one I knew by heart. Owen, you looked beautiful last night. I love how your skin feels after. Claire, I feel safe with you. I haven't felt that with him in years. Jason was the one who pulled that transcript, highlighted it, annotated the timestamps. That kid has a future in intelligence work, if he wants it. The silence was suffocating now. The only sound was the faint hum of the dishwasher in the background. Go on, I said softly. Read aloud. Let's all remember together. Claire finally spoke. Alex, no, I cut her off. Don't say my name like it still belongs in your mouth. I just thought it would be polite to share with our guests what you two have been up to, since you're so good at sharing. Owen tried to speak next. Look, man, I said again, this time louder. Sharper. You look at me and think I didn't notice? You wear that vest into my home, the one I gave you? You let my wife cry on it while you undressed her with words, with hands, with your goddamn loyalty. He flinched. Good. You thought I was sleeping. But I wasn't sleeping. I was waiting. Claire stood up then. Or tried to. I can explain, sit. Down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. She's Saturday this, I tapped the folder, is a copy. The originals have been forwarded to a lawyer. Two, actually. Divorce and criminal. Because some of these transactions, they cross lines. That hotel in Albany? Charged to our joint account. The rental car? In my name. You framed your betrayal in my signature. But I'm taking it back. Claire's lips moved, but no words came out. Just breath. Just the sound of something collapsing inside her. And you, I turned to Owen, you can pack up whatever's left of your dignity and walk out that door right now. Because the next time I see you, it'll be across a courtroom or through a scope. I haven't decided yet. He stood, eyes wide, no words. He left the wine. Figures. Claire stayed frozen, blinking like her body hadn't caught up to her brain yet. You'll be served within the week, I said as I stood. The house is mine. Jason stays with me. You'll find I've moved most of the accounts already. You'll have enough to start over. But not with him. Her voice, when it finally came, was small. You knew. All this time. Since the vest, I said. Since the moment you told me, you cried on his vest like it was holy. Like it meant something. It did. It meant everything. I didn't say another word. I left her there, sitting in the perfect kitchen with perfect dishes and the ruins of her perfectly constructed lie bleeding out on the table in black and white. I walked out into the night, air cold and clean. I didn't look back, because the next part was already in motion. And the thing about building a trap is this: you don't catch them when they're running. You catch them when they think they've won. When they're full, smug, distracted. When they're wearing the vest. The first letter came 3 days after the dinner. Handwritten. Sloppy cursive on cream stationery that still smelled faintly of her perfume, like it had soaked into her skin and refused to let go. No return address, just my name, Alex, scratched across the front like an apology written in haste. I didn't open it. I stared at it for a long time, turning it over in my hands like it might bleed if I squeezed hard enough. Then I slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk, next to the USB drive with the recordings and a printout of our marriage certificate. Symbols of what had been, what had broken, and what would never return. By the end of the week, for more came. Some letters, some voicemails, some pathetic little attempts at reconciliation disguised as logistical questions. Can we talk about Jason's school schedule? Are you sure you want to move forward this fast? Can we just have one civil conversation? Civil? That word clanged in my head like a cracked bell. She wanted civil. Now that her cover was blown, now that Owen had ghosted her and the oxygen had been vacuumed out of the fantasy they built on secrecy and borrowed time, now she wanted civility. But she didn't want it for me. She wanted it for her image. Claire had always been obsessed with appearances. Social media posts with perfect captions, carefully filtered vacation photos, even the way she arranged throw pillows on the couch before guests arrived. Everything had to look curated, effortless, pristine. So when the news started trickling out, when friends began asking why she'd moved in with her sister, why I wasn't at the charity gala, why Jason was always with me, that facade started to crack. And Claire didn't know how to operate without a mask. I gave her no fuel, no fight, just silence. The lawyers were already in motion. Eric had filed the papers with a swiftness I hadn't expected, and every day he sent me another form, another document, another win. I kept a legal pad on the counter with a list titled Claire's Losses at the top, and every time something tipped in my favor, I added it. Custody, house, primary account access. Her name struck from the insurance policy. One by one, a slow, deliberate dismantling. Jason, surprisingly, was thriving. Not in a way that made sense on the surface. He wasn't smiling more or cracking jokes. But he moved differently now. Confident, like he'd been carrying the weight of something too big for his age. And now that the truth was out, he didn't have to pretend anymore. He never asked about Owen. Never asked about his mother's sleeping arrangements. But he did ask questions. Real ones. Are we going to be okay, Dad? Yes. Even if she wants to come back. She won't. Not here. Not in this house. Good. And that was it. No tears. Just resolve. One night, As we sat eating microwave pizza and watching some terrible sci-fi flick, he looked over at me and said, "You know, I think I hated him more than I hated her." Why? Because he knew better. That stayed with me. He was right. Claire had her flaws, but Owen, he was supposed to be family. The man who gave a toast at our wedding, who held Jason when he was barely 10 minutes old, who taught me how to fish when I was too angry at my father to speak to him. That kind of betrayal doesn't just cut. It hollows. But the universe has a rhythm, a balance. And Owen? He tipped the scales. Turns out his wife, estranged or not, was less forgiving than I was. The envelope I'd sent her, the one with the recordings, the messages, the timeline, she handed it over to her attorney. Turns out she'd been sitting on her own collection of grievances, from offshore accounts to fabricated expenses. And Owen's job, regional director at a firm with a moral compass so rigid they once fired a guy for using the company car at a strip club. They didn't like what they saw, especially when it hit LinkedIn under a burner account. Anonymous tip, of course, coincidentally aligned with the day he was scheduled to pitch a major contract. He lost the deal, then the job, then the house. Claire's perfect escape plan turned into a shared U-Haul in her sister's driveway and a GoFundMe for a fresh start that gathered 3 donations and a slew of anonymous comments quoting her own texts. I kept the headlines, printed screenshots, pinned them to the corkboard in the garage, my private museum of consequence. She tried calling again the week after the custody hearing. I let go to voicemail. She left 3 messages. The third one broke. I don't know what I was thinking. He left. "I have nothing, Alex. Please. I just want to see Jason. I miss my son." I sat in the dark, phone glowing in my palm, and for a split second I almost felt it. That old instinct to comfort, to fix, to hold her up when she was falling apart. But I remembered something Jason said the night of the dinner party. After Claire locked herself in the guest bathroom and Owen fled into the night, Jason and I sat in the garage, eating ice cream straight from the tub, just the 2 of us. She looked surprised, he said. About what? That we weren't broken. No. We weren't. Not then. Not now. Claire had set the fire, but Jason and I had walked through it and come out sharper, leaner, forged. So I deleted the voicemails, blocked the number. Then I poured myself a drink. Whiskey. Neat. And I raised the glass in the direction of the corkboard. To loss. To fallout. To justice with a slow burn. I drank and slept like a goddamn rock. She showed up on a Sunday. Not with warning. Not with permission. Just appeared like rot under fresh paint, standing on the porch with a paper bag in one hand and a tremble in the other. I was in the garage oiling the hinges on the old workbench when Jason came out, eyes hard. "She's here," he said flatly. "Who?" "You know." I did. I wiped my hands clean and walked through the kitchen slow, unhurried. I didn't rush. Let her wait. Let her stand there in the wind with her hair too perfect and her face pulled tight in that practiced expression halfway between sorrow and survival. She looked thinner, not sick, just whittled down, like the choices she'd made had started eating from the inside out. When I opened the door, we didn't speak. Not for the first 10 seconds. She just blinked at me like she expected someone else to answer. Someone softer. Someone stupid. "Alex," she said finally, voice so small I almost didn't hear it. "I didn't call you," I replied. "I know." Jason hovered behind me, arms crossed. He didn't speak either, just stared at her like a security system in human form. "I brought? I thought Jason might want these." She lifted the bag. Inside were some books, a hoodie he hadn't worn in 2 years, and a photo album she must have dug up from the basement. Her hands shook as she passed it to me. I didn't reach for it, just stood there, letting her arm hang in midair until she set the bag on the porch railing. "You could have mailed it," I said. I wanted to see him. "No." That stopped her. I don't think she expected me to be that blunt. Claire always counted on my hesitation, my decency, my default toward politeness. But she had burned that out of me. "I miss him," she said. "I'm still his mother." I tilted my head. "You stopped being that when you started calling Owen his father behind my back." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. There was no script for this version of me. No rehearsed lines that would soften the landing. She looked past me, toward Jason, her eyes glassing over. "Baby, please." Jason didn't move. Don't call me that, he said. Her face broke then. Just a little. Like the first crack in ice. You're angry. I get it. But we were family. We were family, Jason snapped. Before you left. She flinched like he'd struck her. I stepped forward. Not aggressive. Just definitive. You lost the right to shape this narrative, I said. You lost it the night you lied. The night you cried into Owen's vest while I was paying your cell bill and folding Jason's laundry. You lost it when you moved the money and booked a suite in Albany with my best friend using our joint card. You lost it the second you turned my son into your alibi. She blinked hard, and her lips quivered, but I didn't care. Not anymore. This is our house now. Our rules. And if you want to see Jason, you go through the court like everyone else. She nodded slowly, that twitchy, embarrassed nod people give when they realize they're not in control. Okay, she whispered. I'll do that. She turned to go, but paused at the edge of the porch. I'm not the villain you think I am, she said without turning around. No, I replied. You're worse. Because you convinced yourself you weren't. She left. I closed the door behind her, locked it, and turned to Jason. You okay? He nodded. Yeah. He picked up the bag, pulled out the photo album, and flipped through a few pages. It was old, pre-digital, grainy smiles and crooked teeth. One picture of Claire holding him as a baby, her eyes shining with something real. He closed the album. Let's go throw it out, he said. We walked to the backyard and fed the whole thing to the fire pit. The pages curled. The glue melted. The smiles turned to smoke. We didn't say a word while it burned. Later that night, after he'd gone to bed and I sat nursing a bourbon in the kitchen, the doorbell rang again. I stood too fast, heart slamming, expecting her shadow to be back on the porch like a stain that wouldn't lift. But it wasn't her. It was Owen. He looked like shit. Beard overgrown. Jacket torn. No vest. You got a lot of balls, I said. I came to apologize. I laughed, loud and bitter. Why now? Because she ruined both our lives, he said. And I think we both know it wasn't just the affair. She's sick, man. I studied him. The slump in his shoulders. The way his eyes darted like prey. She lied to you too, he added. About the money. About the kid. About everything. I stepped out onto the porch and shut the door behind me so Jason wouldn't hear. You think I didn't know that already? He swallowed hard. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry she didn't pick you over me. You're sorry the fantasy crumbled and left you with nothing but your dick in your hand and your name blacklisted on job boards. But you're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry it didn't pay off. His eyes glistened, and for a second, I thought he might throw a punch. Instead, he just said, You always were smarter than me. No, I said, I was just loyal. And then I shut the door in his face. I didn't sleep that night either. But not from anger. Not from pain. From peace. Because now they were both on the outside. And Jason and I, we were just getting started at IT started with wires. Not the kind you trip over, but the kind you find dangling behind a TV cabinet. These were precise, trimmed to length, soldered and heat shrunk, fed into a small black box Jason kept hidden under his bed like it was a totem. I found it by accident when I was vacuuming, something he usually did himself. I knew better than to snoop, but I opened it anyway. Inside was a project. Raspberry Pi motherboard, USB adapter, storage drive, and a battery pack. There were notes too, pages of scribbles in Jason's tight, cramped handwriting, outlining file trees, dates, cross-references. At first, I thought it was homework. Then I saw my name. Then I saw hers. Claire, indexed like a subject, broken into categories. Conversations, accounts, phone metadata. He'd been compiling it all, not just to expose her, but to understand her, to map the shape of the damage. And it was damage. He was treating it like a virus, something that needed to be contained, studied, maybe even repurposed. That's when I knew this was no longer just about survival. Jason was building something, not to hurt her, but to make sure no one like her ever had that power again. I didn't say anything at first. I just closed the box, slid it back where I found it, and sat on the edge of his bed staring at the wall for a long time. That night, I made his favorite dinner, steak, mashed potatoes, corn on the cob with too much butter, and I waited until his plate was half empty before I asked, "What you building?" He didn't flinch. You found the box. Yeah. He chewed quietly for a while, then set down his fork. It's not just about her. It's about all of them. All of who? He looked up, his eyes darker than they used to be, wiser. People who lie. People who hurt you because they think you won't fight back. People who smile while they're cutting your throat. I didn't know what to say to that. So I asked, and what do you plan to do with it? Depends who asks, he said. If it's the school guidance counselor, I say it's a project on digital security. If it's the police, I say I'm just backing up call logs. But if it's you, he leaned forward, voice quiet now. I'm building something that makes sure this never happens to us again. I wanted to tell him he didn't have to, that I'd protect him, that the worst was over, but I'd be lying, and lying was what got us here. He showed me more that weekend. Data scraping bots, text sentiment analyzers, a program that could take a year's worth of messages and distill them into a mood chart, showing when things started to sour. He ran on Claire's phone records. There was a spike 6 months before she left, a dip 4 weeks after Owen entered the picture, a flatline the day she drained Jason's college fund. See, he said, pointing at the screen. They always show their hand if you know where to look. I watched the screen flicker as he clicked through interface menus he'd built from scratch. The kid had constructed his own forensic toolkit. By the time he was 14, he'd probably have his own software suite. He called it Mirror. Because it reflects what people really are, he explained. It doesn't lie. The name gave me chills. Not because it was ominous. Because it was true. He asked if I wanted access. Said he could teach me how to use it. I told him no. That some truths weren't mine to hold. He nodded like he expected that. Like he respected it. But I could see something behind his eyes. Disappointment, maybe. Or maybe just loneliness. Like he'd built this fortress, and I'd chosen to stay outside. So I changed the subject. Took him out for ice cream. Let him ramble about file encryption while we sat on the hood of my truck, watching stars crawl across the sky. He told me he wanted to learn how to pick locks. Not for crime, he clarified quickly. Just to understand how people keep things from each other. I told him I'd buy him a lock-picking kit. He smiled. Not wide. Not childlike. Just enough to make me remember he was still a kid under all that armor. The next day, he was up before me. Working again. No video games. No cartoons. Just lines of code and a journal full of theories. Claire sent another letter. Said she was moving to Florida. Her sister had offered her a room. She asked if Jason wanted to spend the summer with her. I didn't even show him the letter. Just threw it into the fire pit and watched it curl. I didn't tell him she was leaving the state. He'd find out eventually. Probably before I did. Jason didn't need her updates. He had data. He had truth. He had a map of her downfall laid out in digital ink. But more than that, he had something she'd never understand. Purpose. Claire thought she could teach him what love looked like. But all she taught him was what to guard against. And now he was writing his own definition. A legacy forged not from pain, but from clarity. He wasn't rebuilding trust. He was building vigilance. The kind that passes down. The kind that spreads. And maybe that scared me. Maybe it should. But as I watched him sit in the glow of his screen, eyes sharp, fingers steady, I realized something. He wasn't just protecting himself. He was protecting me too. From an ex-Claire. The next Owen. The next betrayal disguised as affection. Jason didn't need revenge. He didn't need forgiveness. He needed truth that couldn't be buried. And he was going to build it, one line of code at a time, T came down to one line of code. Jason stood beside me in the garage, the soft blue glow of the monitor casting shadows across his face. His fingers hovered over the enter key like he was holding a weapon. This will go live, he said. Not just local, global. The database, the analyzer, everything. Anyone can use it. His voice didn't waver. Mine did. You sure? He nodded. People lie, Dad. They always will. But if they know they're being watched, really watched, they'll think twice. I looked at the screen. Mirror version 1.0 deploy now. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't justice. It was a reckoning. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that just sees. I could have stopped him. I could have told him the world needs privacy. Needs forgiveness. But I'd watched that world tear him in half. I'd watched it do the same to me. So I reached over, rested my hand on his shoulder, and gave a single nod. Jason pressed enter. The screen blinked. Then the world changed.